Regarding Ukraine war,
Mm.
the U.S. now secretly drafted a new plan, I guess, together with Russia to end the Ukraine war, the so-called 28 points peace plan. What is that about, and what is your view on it?
Right. Well, the Russians absolutely deny that they had anything to do with it.
Okay.
That's the first thing to say. I mean, the Americans have been going around telling everybody that the Russians were involved. The Russians say they've never even seen it, and nobody has passed it on to them, and they know absolutely nothing about this. Now, what is happening is that Ukraine's army is crumbling on the front lines. I know this has been said many times, but this time it's true. Yesterday, the Russians captured an important town called Kupiansk. There's about we've had Ukrainian troops in Pokrovsk who are encircled. Donbass is about to fall. Many people have said, if the Russians take Donbass, the way's open all the way to Kiev itself, and certainly to the Dnieper. So suddenly, the Americans, who were telling each other just a few weeks ago that the situation on the front lines was in stalemate, suddenly need to stop the war quickly before there's a military collapse. So they're coming up with all these plans. And this plan that they produced is an extraordinary menu. It's like a sort of restaurant menu. It's got little bits that tempt one side and like tempt the other. So no, Ukraine won't join NATO. No NATO troops in Ukraine. But notice that's really very sneaky because they
Mhm.
say no NATO troops. But what
Uh-huh.
about British troops or French troops who go into Ukraine
Uh-huh.
but say that they're not there as part of NATO? So you see what they're doing.
Mhm.
So they're trying to come up with some kind of proposal that they can get both the Ukrainians and the Russians to accept, which will stop the fighting before the collapse comes. Now, the Russians, of course, who are not fools and who've been through this with the Americans many, many times, have seen right through this. And what they will say is, look, this 28-point plan as it stands, obviously it's interesting and is interesting as a discussion document. You now accept that Ukraine can't join NATO, and that's a big thing.
Mhm.
You accept some other things like that the whole Donbass area must come under our control. But there is an awful lot more work to do. So let's sit down and talk about it, which is, of course, exactly what the Americans don't want because they don't want to talk about these things. They don't want to get into a real serious, long drawn out negotiation with the Russians. What they want to do is to stop the fighting now before, as I said, Ukraine collapses. So that's what this is.
Okay. So we will see then. Yeah, I agree with you. I think
Yeah,
they don't like long discussions and
no,
negotiations.
no, they don't do them. They don't do them with China. They don't do them with Russia. The Russians have repeatedly suggested that the Americans put together a proper negotiating team and meet with them um, on a regular basis to iron these out and to find out what the real points of disagreement are and what the real concerns that each side has is, and then to move forward with them. That would be a process of about a year. The Americans don't want to do that, just as they don't want to do that with China. I mean,
Mhm.
we've had all this business about trade negotiations with China.
Mhm.
What trade negotiations? China has repeatedly offered trade
Mhm.
negotiations, but are you aware of proper, serious trade negotiations? Of course not. This isn't certainly not what this administration is able to do. I don't think any administration is able to do that anymore.
Yeah, the US government like to have some idea and then they will throw at you and you just have to accept it, right?
Yes,
So yeah.
exactly. It works with some people. I mean,
Hmm.
it works with some countries.
Yeah.
Um, it might work up to a point in the Middle East, for example,
Mhm.
up to a point, not
Yeah.
fully, but with big, powerful, structured societies and countries like China and Russia, certainly not with China, definitely not with Russia. It just doesn't work like that. And the
Mhm.
Americans just don't seem to get this. I am in touch with some people in the US who say they have contacts with the administration. I've been trying to explain this to them time after time, and it never gets through.
Yeah, the hubris and the arrogance. It's just never ending. They, whatever they do, it
Yeah.
just always,
Yes.
yeah, they never
Yes.
change.
And the idea that they can sort of pull a fast one. Say,
Yeah,
you know, no NATO troops in Ukraine. They don't realize that the Russians are going to see right through that instantly.
yeah. Okay, so I think the past week or two, just the endless scandals seems to me like.
Mm,
So let's start with the BBC. The
yeah,
BBC apologized to Trump over its it has a program on
yeah,
Panorama program that they edited
yeah,
parts of it, Trump's speech or something, right? And on January 6th. And now Trump said that they, even though BBC apologized to that, Trump said that he will still sue the BBC for $1 billion. I just want to let you know, in on this one, the Chinese people 90% support Trump on this one.
yeah. So
So,
they should. They're absolutely right to. Yeah.
so can you tell us a little bit the British reaction to this and the BBC's future in general?
Well, this is actually an interesting story because, of course, the British have built up the BBC and the image
Mm,
of the BBC as this absolutely impartial, completely objective, fact-based media organisation, and it has never at any time been that. It's always reflected very much British and Western attitudes and British government policies. There was a time when it was closer to that approximation than it is today. But I will give an example that I remember from my childhood, which is BBC coverage of the war in Vietnam.
mhm,
And I remember how even then the BBC always referred to the South Vietnamese army, the American the army that the Americans were backing. They always called them the government troops,
okay.
whereas the North Vietnamese army were
Mhm,
the communists.
okay.
So you can already see what they were doing. So and that was and that was at a time when the BBC did perhaps approximate more closely to
Mhm,
objectivity. As time has passed, as Britain has got weaker, as politics in Britain itself have become increasingly partisan, and as the quality of the media in the West has descended and collapsed, the BBC has just become no different from the rest of the media here in Britain. So, if you want to go to coverage about China, Xi Jinping, dictator, Xinjiang,
mhm,
genocide, Tibet, oppression, you'll find all of those things in the BBC. And of course, they are widely accepted here. The one mistake, the one big mistake they've made is that they went after the man who is the president of the United States. The president of the United States, Donald Trump, very unpopular figure in Britain for all kinds of reasons. Um, the BBC strongly backed all the claims during his first term that he was an agent of the Russians and that there was some kind of collusion between him and the Russians. That didn't work. So then they backed the story that he involved himself in some kind of insurrection, trying to overthrow the government of the United States and all of that at the end of the election. And of course, they did what they do all the time now. They regularly do this all the time, which is they edit and they present the stories in a particular way. And this has become so common and so routine that even many people in Britain now can see this. So whereas when I was a child, the BBC in Britain was seen as an enormous, trustworthy institution, it is no longer regarded in that way anymore. And that is creating a crisis for the BBC. And the way the BBC is funded is that all British people who own a television set or are able to access television pay a tax,
mhm,
which goes directly to fund the BBC. And
mhm,
more people in Britain are saying, why should we go on paying this given that it's no longer the impartial, trustworthy organization that we remember. I think the BBC is in crisis. I think in 10 years' time it will be gone.
Yeah, and that I think everybody would be happy to see the BBC is gone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I told you that there is even a term in China, it's called a BBC filter, right? That they just, when they take pictures
Yeah.
in China, it's always gray.
Yeah.
People would put the same picture side by side, very colorful blue sky kind of a day, but the same picture with the
Yeah.
BBC somehow look gray and depressing. So that's how they influence people, their viewers, to hate China,
You know,
So,
once upon a time back in the 1970s, I remember how the BBC used to do documentaries about Chinese culture and civilization, and they were very good.
mhm,
And today, it's a very, very long time since I saw anything about China on the BBC that was remotely positive.
yeah.
I mean, it's never been fully trustworthy, but there has been a massive decline, and it is going to lead to a fall.
And isn't that interesting that, okay, BBC, I guess when they did something like this to China, I mean, to
No,
Russia, to all other countries, there is never any consequences for them. There is
no,
no punishment or anything.
no,
But that's got them to feel even more relaxed and even more
no.
out doing outrageous things to the degree that they think they could do this to a US president.
Well,
So
indeed, yes.
that's when they've gone too far, right? So,
Exactly. Exactly. You see, the other thing was that it's become the BBC's very involved in domestic politics. So, I mean, it was very hostile to Jeremy Corbyn, for example.
okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
um, it's very, very hostile to certain people on the right who are critical of the war in Ukraine and the way in which British policy has been conducted there. And the BBC, like every other element of the British establishment, supported Biden and the Democrats against Trump and internalized a lot of the criticism of Trump. And so they, as you absolutely rightly said, they became complacent and they slipped into the habit of doing the same thing to Trump as they do to everybody else. So now they've been caught. It's been a very bad blow for them. As I said, I mean, they will survive it this time, but they are living now on, I mean, they're coming to the end of the road.
Yeah.
People are getting tired of it.
Another scandal, if not for the
Mm,
Epstein, I think there probably should be more talk about it, is the
mm.
Italian investigators. They are investigating the claims of tourism paying to shoot civilians in Bosnia in the
Yes,
1990s,
yes,
right? They're using some terms like human safari, sniper tourism. It's outrageous when I read
yes.
it. And so, first of all, I guess it's true. I guess there's no reason to doubt it. But some people pointed out that I saw some people commenting on that. This is well known in some parts, I guess in Bosnia, around Sarajevo or something. People actually well aware of this, but nobody paid attention until now.
I,
So why is that?
I knew all about it. I mean,
Mhm.
I know about it. I've always known about this. I knew all about what was going on in Bosnia. I should say that it's not just Bosnia. I mean, I've heard stories. This I cannot confirm, but that in a certain area of North London, people from there have been going to Gaza and
Yeah.
joining the Israeli military, and they've been engaging in human safaris there.
Mhm.
And that at one time, something like that was also advertised for Ukraine, except, of course, you can't really play human safaris with the Russian army. So that basically ended very quickly. But no, absolutely. And that, by the way, it's important for people again in China to be aware of. I mean, we have this incredibly violent, brutal, sadistic side in our societies, in our culture, which the Chinese people experienced in the 19th century. And it's never completely gone away. Look at our look at our films. Look
Mhm.
at our film culture, for example, and you will see it there. So, absolutely, why is it coming? Why is it coming out now? That is a very good question, actually, which nobody really has provided a simple answer to. Um, it could be, it could be connected to domestic Italian politics.
Mhm.
I'm just guessing, but I mean, I don't really know.
Sometimes I think it, interesting enough, I think it most times the truth eventually comes out, right? I think,
Yes.
but it's just for various reasons, sometimes purely coincidence, I think, is
Yeah.
somebody come upon something and then started to raising voice and then for whatever reason it pick up. So it's hard to say
Yeah.
exactly why many times. But one thing for sure is it does seems like to me sooner or later the truths have the tendency to emerge. I feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Mhm.
mean, I should say that my wife met a person in Germany who did exactly that and went not to Bosnia but to Croatia during the Yugoslav wars
Mhm.
to do exactly those sort of things.
Okay.
So, you know, this
Yeah.
is not unusual. A lot of this kind of thing goes on.